Hello everyone, I am very glad that you're joining this story. Subscribe, like and comment. Enjoy the story, smile more often.
I wanted the day to feel magical, even if the cake was from Costco and the decorations were held together with scotch tape and hope. The living room smelled like sugar and plastic balloons, and I'd spent the whole morning trying to coax curls into Lila's soft baby hair, even though she kept smacking the brush out of my hands like I was committing a war crime. She wore a pale pink dress my best friend Nora had mailed last week, with tiny lace ruffles and a bow on the back that wouldn't sit straight no matter how many times I tried to fix it. Mike didn't notice. Or maybe he did and just didn't think it mattered. People kept arriving like we were hosting royalty, though most of them only came for the photo ops and free wine. My aunt from Arizona, who never misses a chance to judge my parenting. Mike's cousin Jenna, who has 3 kids and 3,000 unsolicited opinions. And of course, Karen, my mother-in-law, arrived 20 minutes early, empty-handed, which wouldn't have been notable except she made a big production of pretending she forgot the gift in the car, only to return with a used-looking rattle and a smug smile. She hugged Lila like she was holding her breath and then immediately started in on how fussy the baby looked. Said it loud enough for everyone to hear, but soft enough to pretend it wasn't meant as an insult. Karen had that talent, like she took a class in weaponized courtesy. I tried to ignore her. I really did. For the sake of the party, for Lila, for my sanity. I kept my voice high and cheerful and told myself it was just a few hours. I could take it. I'd taken worse. For 5 years, I'd smiled through every jab, every side-eye, every condescending comment about my job, my cooking, my mothering. I'm a graphic designer who freelances from home, and in Karen's eyes, that's just a fancy way of saying unemployed. She used to ask Mike, in front of me, if I'd ever considered a real career, like I'd spent the last decade coloring with crayons instead of designing brand identities for Fortune 500 companies. But he'd never said anything. Just a weak chuckle and a nervous glance in my direction, like that somehow counted as defense. The party moved along. People drank, kids screamed, and I was busy pretending to have fun. We lit the candle on the cake, a simple white one with one written in pink buttercream, and the room sang in chaotic unison while Lila stared wide-eyed, probably wondering if we'd all lost our minds. I helped her blow out the candle, and then came the photos. Of course, Karen had to be in the center of everything, practically elbowing people out of the way to stand next to Mike and Lila. She kept telling people to get one with Grandma, like the party was her damn retirement celebration. And then it happened. I was crouched beside Lila's high chair, wiping icing off her fingers, when Karen leaned in close, so close I could smell her drugstore perfume and the faint trace of wine on her breath. She smiled, the kind of smile you use when you're about to throw a punch, but want to make it look like a hug. "Too bad the baby looks like you," she whispered, loud enough for at least 2 people behind her to hear. "She's gonna struggle." I froze. Not because I was surprised. No, nothing Karen says really shocks me anymore, but because it was so blatant, so cruel, and so perfectly timed. In that split second, everything slowed down. I looked up and caught Jenna's expression twist into awkward discomfort. I watched Mike hear it, process it, and then do absolutely nothing. Not even a glance in my direction. Just turned his head toward the camera and smiled. Something inside me cracked. But not in the way you might think. I didn't cry. I didn't scream. I didn't tell her off in front of everyone, though God knows I wanted to. No, I smiled too. I picked up my phone, got everyone together for the group shot, and said, "Let's all smile for the camera." Click. That photo sits on my desktop right now. I look at it sometimes like it's a police lineup. Karen in the middle, holding Lila like a prize she didn't win, Mike smiling like everything's just peachy, and me, smiling like a woman who just realized she doesn't need to play nice anymore. That photo marked the end of one thing and the beginning of another. Because while everyone else was sipping punch and complimenting the dollar store streamers, I was already planning my exit from this absurd, rigged little play. That night, after the last guest left and Lila finally passed out with frosting still in her hair, I sat at my desk and ordered a second hard drive. one for backups, one for deletions. And in that quiet house, while Mike snored on the couch and Karen's words echoed in my head, I stared at that group photo like it was a blueprint. Because if they wanted to erase me from the story, I was going to make sure I erased them first. The first time I did it, it felt like nothing more than petty revenge. I sat in my office at night, the glow from my monitor casting long shadows across the cluttered desk, and opened the birthday photo in Photoshop like it was a wound I was about to stitch shut. Karen stood in the middle of the group, wearing that smug little grin she always wore, the kind that made you feel like she knew something about you that you didn't. I selected her image with the lasso tool, carefully tracing the edge of her floral blouse, and hit delete. Just like that, she vanished. The background filled in with a blur of wallpaper and cake decorations, and I sat back in my chair, watching the space she'd occupied disappear as if she'd never been there at all. I didn't laugh. I didn't smile. I just exhaled. A deep, long, quiet exhale that had been sitting inside me for years. After that, it got easier. I pulled up the video of Lila's first steps, Karen's voice screeching in the background about how her son took his first steps at 8 months, like it was some kind of Olympic record, and muted the audio. Then I cropped the frame until all that was left was Lila toddling forward and me catching her, arms outstretched, face lit up like the 4th of July. Karen was gone. Her voice, her face, her presence, all scrubbed from the memory like a stain. I uploaded that version to the cloud, replaced the original in our shared album, and didn't say a word. Mike never noticed. Or maybe he noticed and didn't care. Hard to say with him these days. Soon, it became routine. Like cleaning the house or brushing my teeth. Karen out of the birthday party. Karen out of the Easter brunch. Karen out of the video from the pumpkin patch, where she loudly commented on how pale Lila looked and asked if I was feeding her properly. Gone. 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 I even went back and edited older pictures, baby shower, gender reveal, even our wedding. It wasn't hard. Just time-consuming. But every time I did it, I felt a little more like I was regaining control of something that had been slipping through my fingers for years. The memories were mine now. Not hers. But I didn't stop at the photos. No, this went deeper than that. I started booking family vacations without looping her in. I changed the pediatrician and conveniently forgot to give her the new office address. When daycare asked for an updated list of people authorized to pick up Lila, I crossed Karen's name off and replaced it with my friend Nora's. Karen didn't find out right away. She still showed up at appointments and events like she was the matriarch of some royal bloodline. But each time, she was just a little more confused, a little more unwelcome. And I didn't lift a finger to correct her. I don't even think Mike realized how much had changed. He still texted her occasionally, still answered when she called, but he never noticed she wasn't showing up in any of the new pictures. He never asked why she wasn't included in the holiday plans or why her chair was empty at the last family dinner. Sometimes I wondered if he was just happy not to deal with attention anymore. Sometimes I wondered if he even noticed me at all. I'd been married to Mike for 11 years since I was 23. Except, I'm 33 now. So, that math is obviously off. Let's see who catches it. One afternoon, I was packing Lila's diaper bag for a quick trip to the park when something caught my eye. Tucked between the wipes and the spare onesie was a small folded piece of paper. At first, I thought it was just a receipt or maybe one of Mike's endless to-do lists that somehow ended up in all the wrong places. But when I unfolded it, my chest tightened. The handwriting was instantly recognizable, tight, loopy cursive that always looked like it belonged to someone trying too hard to be elegant. Karen. The note wasn't long, but it didn't have to be. It read, "You deserve a better mother. One who knows what she's doing." Think about it. That was it. No signature. No explanation. Just those 12 words, sitting in the bottom of my daughter's bag like a landmine. I sat there on the edge of the bed, the note trembling slightly in my fingers, and tried to figure out what exactly Karen was suggesting. Was it a dig at me? A weird attempt to bond with Lila? A threat? Was she implying that she was the better mother? That she knew what she was doing and I didn't? My mind spiraled with every ugly possibility. I imagined her sneaking it into the bag while I was distracted with guests. I imagined her whispering things to Lila when I wasn't in the room. I imagined her planting seeds. She was always planting seeds. I crumpled the note and shoved it into the kitchen trash can, pushing it deep under the coffee grounds and eggshells so no one else would see it. But I didn't delete the photo that day. I didn't crop or edit or mute. I didn't touch my computer at all. Instead, I sat at the kitchen table long after the sun had gone down, the baby monitor hissing softly in the background, and stared at nothing. Because erasing her from photos was one thing. But now, I had to figure out how to erase her from real life. And that was going to take more than a mouse click. I didn't sleep that night, not even a little, and I know it sounds dramatic, like I'm one of those overly sensitive moms who sees conspiracy in every sideways glance, but that note kept replaying in my head like a broken record spinning under fluorescent lights. You deserve a better mother. One who knows what she's doing. I heard it over and over in Karen's voice, dripping with judgment and faux concern, the same way she used to talk about my cooking like she was trying to help when she was really twisting the knife. It wasn't just a note, not really. It was a declaration, a quiet little war flag tucked between diapers and snack packs. I tried to tell myself it didn't mean anything, that maybe it was a weird joke, a clumsy attempt at sentimentality that landed like a slap, but deep down I knew better. Karen didn't do things by accident. She never had. Every backhanded compliment, every well-timed criticism, every story she told in front of Mike's friends about how I used to burn spaghetti or how I wore flats to our engagement photos instead of heels, it was all intentional. Death by 1,000 paper cuts, and this note? This was just another slice. The worst part wasn't even the message, it was how quickly it cracked open something I'd buried a long time ago. Because when I read those words, I didn't just hear Karen. I heard my own mother. Cold, distant, efficient. A woman who could walk into a burning house and still judge the wallpaper. She died 5 years ago from a heart attack she probably saw coming and still refused to talk about. We weren't close at the end, not that we ever really were, and the thing that gutted me most wasn't grief. It was the realization that I had spent my entire adult life trying to prove to women like her that I was good enough. And now here I was, letting Karen get close to my daughter. Letting her hold Lila with those same arms that once pulled Mike away from his high school girlfriend because she wasn't fit for our kind of family. Letting her buy clothes I didn't ask for, whisper advice I didn't want, and worse, letting her act like she knew better. Like she was the steady hand. Like I was the guest in my own motherhood. What the hell was I doing? I stared at the ceiling until the first gray light of morning spilled through the blinds, and then I did the one thing I probably should have done months ago. I called Nora. My best friend since junior high, the one person who has never sugarcoated anything for me, not even during my regrettable pixie cut phase in 2009. She picked up on the second ring, her voice thick with sleep and suspicion. "Tell me you didn't murder someone," she mumbled, followed by a yawn that made me feel less alone. I didn't even say hello. I just read her the note. There was a pause on the line, the kind that stretches longer than it should, and then she said, "Girl, block her like she's a spam call and change the locks." I laughed, but it was brittle and short-lived. She didn't. "I'm serious," she continued. "That's not just weird, that's boundary obliterating. Like, that's a new level of nuts. She's acting like Lila's her second chance." That sentence stuck with me. Second chance. Because that's exactly what it felt like. Like Karen saw Lila as a do-over, a shot at redoing all the parenting mistakes she made with Mike, except this time she wanted to be the hero. And if that meant cutting me out in slow, polite increments, then so be it. Later that day, while Lila napped with her favorite stuffed elephant tucked under one chubby arm, I sat at my desk and pulled up our shared album. The one Mike and I had created for family to see milestone pictures and silly bath time videos. And I started deleting. Not just muting or cropping or hiding, deleting. Every picture of Karen holding Lila. Every video where her voice edged into the background. Gone. I even changed the album permissions so she couldn't add comments or save images. It felt brutal, but necessary. Like disinfecting a wound you can't see but know is festering. Then, Out of curiosity, or maybe because I already knew something was off, I checked the guest list for Lila's party. We'd used an online RSVP site that let you see everyone's name and whether they were bringing a +1. Most people hadn't bothered to click the +1 option. But there it was. Karen. RSVP'd. +1. My heart did that weird lurch it always does when the body senses danger before the brain can name it. Because Karen didn't have a partner. Her husband, Mike's dad, died years ago. She didn't have close friends, unless you count the group of tight-lipped women she met at church who only liked her because she brought store-bought cookies and flattered their perfume choices. So who the hell was the +1? I stared at the screen for what felt like an hour, rereading that line like it would suddenly rewrite itself. But it didn't. It just sat there, quietly taunting me with the possibility that Karen had a plan. One I hadn't seen coming. One that wasn't just about comments and notes and passive-aggressive power plays. And the terrifying part? I realized that whatever Karen was planning, I might already be too late to stop it. It had been bothering me for days, that simple, innocuous RSVP that sat on the guest list like a loaded gun with the safety off. Karen confirmed attending. +1. It was such a small detail, the kind of thing most people wouldn't think twice about, but it gnawed at me the way a bad feeling does before a storm rolls in. Karen didn't have a +1. Not in the literal sense. Her husband, God rest his cold feet, had been buried for 8 years, and the only men she spoke to these days were the type who offered to carry her groceries at the store in exchange for hearing her opinions about rising property taxes. So who the hell was she bringing to my daughter's party? I asked Mike if he knew, not because I expected a real answer, but because sometimes he surprised me with scraps of awareness. This wasn't one of those times. He shrugged and said, probably someone from her Bible study, like that explained anything at all. But then, 2 nights before the party, I got a text from Aunt Rita, Mike's dad's sister, who was never really part of the family inner circle, but had the kind of blunt honesty I respected. Even if she wore too much perfume and smoked menthols like they were vitamin supplements. The message came in while I was brushing Lila's teeth and went something like, "You might want to keep an eye on Karen. She's been running her mouth at church, saying some real dangerous stuff about you." I called her immediately, toothbrush still foaming in my daughter's mouth, and asked what she meant. And Rita, bless her steel-trap memory and unfiltered delivery, told me everything. Apparently, Karen had been telling a small group of women at church that I was struggling emotionally, that I had been drinking during the day, and that Mike was considering his options if I didn't get help soon. According to Rita, Karen phrased it like she was just worried, like she was trying to be a good grandma, but everyone in the room knew exactly what she was implying. She wasn't concerned. She was preparing a narrative. She was laying the foundation for a custody story. And suddenly, the +1 made sense. The woman Karen invited was named Sylvia Carr, her church friend, yes, but also a part-time social worker who'd recently transferred into family court administration. Not exactly a smoking gun, but close enough to smell the smoke. Karen was bringing someone to the party who could testify, who could witness, who could confirm that I was a mess in need of removal from my own daughter's life. That note in the diaper bag wasn't just a cruel jab, it was a breadcrumb, and I'd followed it right into the storm. I sat in the kitchen that night, wine glass untouched beside my laptop, and opened a folder I'd started months ago labeled simply Karen. Inside were screenshots of text messages she'd sent criticizing my parenting, mocking my job, and once, bizarrely, accusing me of feeding Lila too many apples, as if I were dosing her with arsenic. There were voice memos too, ones I'd saved from voicemails and accidental pocket dials, where Karen ranted about me to someone I couldn't identify. In one, she said, "She's not stable. I'm just saying, if something happened, I wouldn't be surprised." That one chilled me more than I care to admit. I printed everything. Every screenshot. Every transcript. Every documented piece of passive-aggressive venom she'd ever slipped into my inbox. I put them all in a neat little folder labeled, "In case of fire." I uploaded the files to a flash drive and made 3 copies. One went into the safe. One went into my purse. And the third? I mailed to her church pastor with a brief letter attached. If Karen continues spreading defamatory stories about me, this file will become public. I'm a mother, not a martyr. I mailed a second package to the women's ministry leader at her church and a third to a lawyer I'd met once through Nora's divorce proceedings. Just in case. I wasn't going to wait for the explosion. I was putting out matches before the flames even touched my walls. The next morning, I played it cool. I made pancakes, packed snacks, and smiled like someone who had absolutely nothing to hide. Karen came by that afternoon to drop off a birthday dress, a hideous thing covered in sequins and bows that probably itched like hell, and tried to make small talk about weather and gas prices. I let her talk. I let her believe everything was normal, that I hadn't already started to dismantle the scaffolding of her little play. But later that night, after Lila had fallen asleep and Mike was passed out in front of the television again with a beer on his chest and no curiosity in his bones, I did something I'd never done before. I logged into Mike's iCloud. Not to snoop, not really, but because I had a sudden, gnawing suspicion that he knew more than he'd let on. That maybe his silence wasn't just ignorance, it was participation. Complicity. I used the password he'd told me years ago, the same one he used for Netflix and DoorDash and our shared utility account. I typed it in, half expecting to be denied access. But I wasn't. And what I found nearly knocked the wind out of me. At first, I thought I'd logged into the wrong account because everything was too tidy, too curated, too intentional for Mike. He was the kind of man who had 4,000 unread emails and still searched for old invoices by typing vague words like water bill and praying the gods of digital chaos would hand him a miracle. But this iCloud account wasn't chaos, it was a vault. Inside the Family Memories folder, nested beneath layers of innocently named directories like Lila Pics and Bills 2022, was a hidden album labeled Just in Case. The name alone sent a cold ripple down my spine, like hearing your name in a stranger's mouth across a dark street. I clicked it. Inside were over 100 photos, every single one of them featuring Karen. Karen holding Lila. Karen at our wedding. Karen standing behind me at the baby shower with that crooked little smirk she always wore when she thought no one was watching. And not just photos, there were videos too. Voice recordings. One labeled Karen voicemail, May. Another, argument with Sarah, backup. My name, my voice, my life, cataloged and sorted like I was a threat he might need to report. My hands shook as I scrolled, the cursor trembling like it was picking up on my pulse. I knew I wasn't crazy. I knew I wasn't unstable. But something about seeing it all archived like courtroom evidence made me feel like I was halfway to being institutionalized. He hadn't stood up for me at the party. He hadn't said a word when Karen called me a burden, a failed mother, an emotional liability, but apparently, he had been saving files. Preparing for some future where he might need to defend himself, or worse, prove I was the problem. I closed the laptop and sat in silence, the house creaking softly around me, as if even the walls had grown tired of pretending. I thought about waking him up right then, shaking him until he saw the damage, until he admitted what he was doing. But I waited until morning, because I wanted the words to be steady when I said them. He came into the kitchen in sweatpants and that stupid college hoodie he wore like a security blanket, and asked if there was any coffee left. I told him to sit down. I went into your iCloud, I said, and before I could finish the sentence, his face changed. Not guilt. Not anger. Just resignation. Like he'd been waiting for this day and had already rehearsed his lines. He didn't deny it. Didn't even try. Just said, I was keeping it all in case things got worse. I asked him worse for who. He looked at the floor, like the truth might be scrawled on the tile grout, and said, I didn't want to choose sides. And that's when something inside me not snapped, but calcified. Because he had chosen. He'd chosen every time he let Karen speak unchecked. He'd chosen every time he stayed silent while I bit my tongue bloody. He'd chosen by doing nothing while I carried the weight of every slight, every jab, every wound she disguised as a family tradition. So I chose for him. I logged into every shared album, every backup file, every family calendar and cloud folder we had access to. I blocked Karen's email. I revoked her view permissions. I wiped her face from the digital history of my child's life. Not just because she didn't deserve the memories, but because Lila didn't deserve the weight of that legacy. She didn't need to grow up believing love looked like manipulation dressed as tradition. She didn't need to see her grandmother smiling beside her mother while planting knives in her back. Then I packed a small suitcase, tossed in Lila's favorite stuffed elephant, a few clothes, my laptop, and left the house while Mike was in the shower. I didn't slam the door. I didn't leave a note. I just walked out like someone slipping through the emergency exit of a burning building. Not because I hated him, but because I'd finally realized he wasn't going to put out the fire. He was going to let it burn as long as he didn't have to move. We're staying at Nora's for now. She cleared out her guest room and put fresh sheets on the bed without asking questions. Lila thinks it's a sleepover. I haven't corrected her. Maybe I won't. 2 days after we left, I got a voicemail. Karen's voice, thinner than I'd ever heard it, almost human. She was crying. Not the performative kind, not the kind you use to sway a room, but the kind that seeps out when the control starts to slip. She said, "I never meant to hurt you. I just didn't want her to be like you, because I saw how hard life was for you." And I stood in that tiny guest room, phone in one hand, Lila napping in the next room, and I didn't say a word. I didn't reply. I didn't save the message. I just deleted it like I'd deleted everything else. Now, there's a photo album on my desk. It's blank. No pictures. No captions. No lingering ghosts in the corners of group shots. Just a title. Lila's first birthday, final cut. Because sometimes, the best revenge isn't an explosion. It's an erasure. A clean, quiet purge. Not fire, not fury, but a silence so loud, it echoes. Sometimes, the best revenge is silence. Sometimes, the loudest scream is deletion.